We've got the generators in places, both north and south. We've got generators on Charleston, the Rubies here. They're ready. We had the program stood up and has been there for 10 years. They're ready. We had the program stood up and has been there for 10 years. If we get it front through, we need to seat it. Any technical questions, because I just know what they look like. The generators, that is. Thank you. If we get it front through, we need to seat it. If we get it front through, we need to seat it.
Okay, folks, so in this video here, I want to read a little bit more from this report to the President and the Congress, National Weather Modification Policies and Programs from 1979 that was presented by the U.S. Department of Commerce. And more specifically, I want to go into the summary of major findings. It's pretty curious. And there's one more thing here, too. Hang on just a second. Yeah, there it is. I wanted to share this with y'all, too, because we're always hearing about the southern border, right? And all these issues going on with the southern border. Well, this here is something concerning the northern border with Canada. And this is something that was written and authored and supported by Mr. Andy Biggs there. He's also been the big sponsor for those withdraw from who bills that have been introduced again recently. So I thought this was kind of curious. This was from June 20th, so just a few days ago. Congress of the United States, Washington, D.C., June 20th, 2023. The Honorable Alejandro Mayorkas, Secretary, U.S. Department of Homeland Security. The Honorable Troy A. Miller, Senior Official performing the duties of the Commissioner, U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Secretary Mayorkas and Senior Official performing the duties of the Commissioner Miller. We are concerned with recent reports from concerned citizens and members of the public that ports of entry, or POEs, along the United States border with Canada are being left open and unattended for extended periods of time. This information accompanies publicly available reporting and increases in illegal border crossings along the northern border, including by foreign nationals from countries in Asia and the Middle East. Our sources indicate that Customs and Border Protection, or CBP, agents and staff may have been instructed to open points of entry, POEs, for periods up to 24 hours per day. And citizens are concerned about the long periods of time when POEs are open without sufficient supervision or surveillance by CBP personnel. We are seeking answers to the following questions and the requested documents no later than July 10th of 2023. What are the current hours of operation for United States POEs, or points of entry, along the United States border with Canada? What are the current staffing levels for POEs along the United States border with Canada? What are the staffing levels for each POE with extended operating hours? What are the operating hours for each Canadian POE across from a United States POE with extended operating hours? Please provide copies of all memoranda, guidance documents, or other materials provided to CBP agents or staff related to the operating hours of points of entry or the extension of operating hours along the United States border with Canada. Please provide copies of all memoranda, guidance documents, or other materials related to staffing of POEs with extended operating hours. Sincerely, Andy Biggs, Tom Tiffany, and Matthew M. Rosendale Sr. So I thought that was kind of curious. I thought that and we'll have to keep an eye on that and see if they actually produce any of those documents by July 10th of 2023. So anyway, get back to this report to the President and the Congress from 1979, National Weather Modification Policies and Programs. And now this again was reported to the President and the Congress from the U.S. Department of Commerce. And this is their summary of major findings. This chapter contains a summary of findings on the state of scientific knowledge concerning weather modification, the present state of development of weather modification technology, and the problems impeding effective implementation of weather modification technology in each of the 11 areas of investigation specified in Section 4 of the Act. Major findings, Item 1. Section 4.1 of the Act requires a review and analysis of the present and past research efforts to establish practical weather modification technology, particularly as it relates to reducing loss of life and crop and property destruction. They're not exactly doing a very good job of reducing the loss of life and crop and property destruction right now, huh? Yeah. Introduction. A cloud seeding technology currently exists. It is employed commercially in this country in attempts to clear fog from airports, to augment snowpacks in mountainous regions, to increase rain from summer showers, and to reduce destruction by hail. Well, we're having record-sized hail going on, huh? It's kind of curious, isn't it? Mm-hmm. 78 operational programs were reported to the Department of Commerce in 1977 under the provisions of Public Law 92 to 205, the National Weather Modification Reporting Act of 1971. In 1978, 50 programs were reported, covering about 5% of the country's land area. So again, to reiterate, to anyone that doesn't want to believe that this has been ongoing, you have got to realize by now, seriously. The federal government has sponsored weather modification research since cloud seeding became a scientific reality in 1946. Since cloud seeding became a scientific reality in 1946. And again, I have spent almost 3 decades of my life being ridiculed and insulted by the general population, telling me that it's just a conspiracy theory. But they came to a scientific reality in 1946, right? Techniques for clearing supercooled fog from airport runways are now proven. Many precipitation enhancement projects conducted over the past 3 decades present evidence of success. As the Weather Modification Advisory Board concluded, the experimental evidence for cloud seeding has not yet reached the levels of objectivity, repeatability, and predictability required to establish new knowledge and techniques, and you never will. All they can do is keep trying. They will never be able to predict that variable. Never. They will never be able to control nature in the way that they would really truly like to. But meanwhile, while they're attempting to, we living here at ground zero get to deal with the most of the consequences, right? There are, nevertheless, several lines of evidence suggesting that carefully controlled seeding using means appropriate to the aims will result in weather modification effects of useful dimensions. Experiments in hurricane moderation have also been encouraging, but they are too few for definitive results. Much more work needs to be done to determine the efficacy of hail suppression and other weather modification techniques. Well, if they're trying hail suppression right now, it ain't working. Just saying. Because many of the conclusions drawn from cloud seeding experiments depend upon statistical analysis, a brief summary of the topic is given in the following paragraphs. The remainder of this section of the report examines the status of present and past research efforts in each of the above subject areas in more detail. The role of statistics. A number of research projects and a larger number of operational cloud seeding efforts have been undertaken since 1946. Research projects, including experimental cloud seeding efforts, are conducted to learn more about clouds and cloud processes, to determine cloud responses to seeding, and eventually to develop, through continued exploration and testing under rigidly controlled conditions, reliable techniques for achieving desirable results at the Earth's surface through cloud seeding. And again, what right do they have? Seriously. Operational cloud seeding is the routine application of such a technique for the purpose of achieving the maximum possible results desired by a group seeking to modify the weather. And don't tell me they can't control that jet stream. Don't tell me they cannot control that jet stream. They absolutely can. And they use all of these commercial planes that has an influence on it as well. So the FAA and their flight schedules and their flight paths all play a part in it as well. So, and the same thing with the military and their little exercises that they do. Because of the inherent natural variability of the weather, yeah, exactly. Statistics becomes a primary tool for judging what was accomplished compared with what would have happened if nature had not been altered purposefully. The statistical design used in most past experiments has called for some form of randomization scheme for allotting the seed in quotation marks or no seed decision to experimental units. For example, a cloud, a storm, or a day generally within a designated area. Remember, Senator Golkitchia's words, if we see a front, we need to seed it. Yeah, and he just knows what the generators look like. Yeah. Analysis have consisted mainly of testing the null hypotheses on the resulting data. The null hypothesis states that the seeded and unseeded samples are drawn from the same population. That is, the seeding had no detected effects. If the null hypotheses could be rejected with only a 5% chance of being wrong, experimenters have generally accepted that the populations were significantly different and the difference was related to the seeding. Yeah. It is no simple matter to develop a statement regarding the statistical significance of an experimental result. There are many potential sources of error in the collected data, and some of the errors can be systematic. thus favoring one or the other side of the question. Once the data set is accepted, it can be used to answer many different questions. If the experimenter is allowed to ask an unlimited number of questions, some will appear to be answered positively just by chance. Thus, a minimum number of physically meaningful questions is best. Even then, many statistical techniques can be applied to the data to answer the questions selected, and statisticians have legitimate differences of opinion as to which techniques may be most appropriate for a particular experiment. Thus, a range of numbers can be given to express the statistical significance of a given experimental results. So it's all in the statistics, is that what they're trying to say here? Yeah, and, just that, they can't control that variable. They say it right there, because of the inherent natural variability of the weather. They'll never be able to. They will certainly try, and they can certainly develop these statistical data sets from their little experiments, and they can try to say that, well, because on this number of days in this period of time and over this region, this is what happened here, then we should just put that into the computer and let the computer model it from there. And, it's very dangerous. I'm just saying, that's probably going to be edited out. But anyway, yeah. A statement of statistical significance is not the final answer to the question of whether cloud seeding made any difference. Such a statement attempts to indicate the probability that the observed difference could have risen by chance. If that probability is as low as 5%, one is tempted to accept the reality of the effect. But the physical plausibility of the result, the strength of supporting evidence, and other subjective factors are important in making a judgment. Unless most informed individuals find the totality of evidence persuasive, the case cannot be considered proven. In assessing results of experiments in this section, therefore, qualitative terms such as promising or likely are prevalent. You don't say promising or likely. Because of the variables, they cannot say definitively, and they know that. So therefore, they can create their new terms, which would, be more positive towards their objective and their agenda by stating that these are promising or likely are prevalent, because they can't state it definitively and actually mean it, because they cannot control that variable. I know I've said that so many times, but because I'm repetitive, I gotta say it again. They cannot control the variables. That's not to say they aren't trying and that we aren't feeling the effects of their attempts to control those variables. They will never, ever. Nature will always find a way to counter it. Always. Federal activities have been limited almost exclusively to research and field experimentation. The results from a number of the more recent seeding test projects have resolved some questions concerning the responses of various types of clouds to several different seeding modes. As the following discussion indicates, however, many other questions remain unanswered. Supercooled fog and stratus clouds. The simplest of all scientific experiments in cloud seeding is to spread pellets of dry ice or particles of silver iodide into layers of supercooled fog and low stratus clouds, seeding that storm front, just like Mr. Go Getcha says, right? The resulting transformation of the cloud composition from water drops into ice crystals is clear, dramatic, and incontrovertible. Initially, the ice crystals are too small to fall from the cloud, but they grow at the expanse of remaining water drops. As turbulent air motions diffuse them into nearby cloud regions, they can grow large enough to produce a snow shower, which is exactly what they've been doing up there on Mount Charleston and up on the Red Rock Peaks, and to the north and all the way around us for decades, okay? And again, they just recently received $1.2 million for their little cloud seeding project for the next 2 years here in Nevada. Yeah. The amount of snowfall produced in this way is trivial because the stratus cloud initially contains so little water, but visibility almost always improves, and often a large hole may be opened in the stratus. Oh my, would that be a hole punch cloud? The U.S. Air Force has practiced this technology for many years at various air base installations in the United States and abroad, and commercial airlines have used this type of weather modification at selected airports in the northwestern United States. The Soviet Union has said to have experimented with this type of technique over areas much larger than airports. The possibility of using this technique to open holes in winter stratus clouds to increase the amount of solar radiation reaching the ground has been discussed but has received little research attention. Although theoretical calculations have been made to estimate the level of effort needed to open a hole of sufficient size to be meaningful, Few field experiments have been conducted for that specific purpose. Sure. Right, because now we know they don't really have to do a whole lot because they already have their little ground-based stations. All they got to do is change up that little frequency in that signal, and it will open it right up, right? They've gotten more sophisticated with some of this stuff, that's for sure. Clouds over mountainous regions. The seeding of orographic clouds to stimulate precipitation has been one of the most actively pursued weather modification activities. Most orographic precipitation occurs when winter storm winds encounter mountain barriers. These upslope winds are continuously cooled to form clouds and precipitation. Typically, only about 20 to 50% of the water that is condensed to form orographic clouds actually falls as precipitation. The rest is re-evaporated on the leeward mountain slopes. Thus, orographic clouds are good candidates for seeding to increase the fraction of water falling on the mountain slopes. A major portion of the precipitation, I'll let you know, folks, they have a season here. They have a ski season, and they host ski events. They do all kinds of ski stuff, so there's a market for it. Look at Tahoe, to the north of our location. They created a market for it as well, where people have invested like a lot of money in these ski resorts to be members of these ski resorts, right? A major portion of the precipitation in the mountainous western United States occurs through the orographic process. Snowpack accumulates during the winter and melts and runs off during the late spring and summer. Much of this runoff is stored in reservoirs for future use as irrigation or domestic water supply. Well, thank you very much for giving us your fake-ass water, because, you already done drained all of our reservoirs so that you can reinforce those empty spaces and those voids underground and turn them into your little bunkers and your little stations underground, right? Yeah, so then you're going to replace all the water that you took from us and drained out of those reservoirs with this fake ass water, right? To make up for it? No thanks. I mean, come on. Just, whatever. I'll edit that out. Sorry. I didn't mean to offend. But I'll probably take that out anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Anyway, some of this water helps generate hydroelectric energy. Any increase in the snowpack can therefore be translated directly into additional useful water. Doesn't matter if it's chemicalized, doesn't matter if it causes other illnesses and it is toxic, right? Consequently, orographic clouds in the western states have been long-term targets of both operational and experimental cloud seeding projects. Long-term, folks. Yeah. And some of these people who are in charge of these systems, who rely on their salaries that are associated with these jobs that were created to prop up these projects, will try to tell people that, oh, there's no turning back now. We've already gone past that point of no return, because if we stop doing it now, there could be even worse consequences. Well, I say we take our chances. Let's just take our chances with that. Let's just see how Mother Nature can rebound and respond and repair things and repair the system without y'all messing around with it. Why don't we try that for a little while? Is that even an option? Is that even on the table? The 1957 final report of President Eisenhower's Advisory Committee on Weather Control discussed several winter orographic seeding projects. Since no research project results were available, the ACWC studied data from operational seeding projects. They compared target area precipitation during seeded storms with that which occurred in nearby, presumably unaffected, control areas. And again, how can they control it? I mean, I suppose they could have big turbines on some of their jets and some of their aircraft, kind of directing and controlling the airflow in a certain region, over a certain region, but the target/control precipitation ratios for seeded storms were compared with historical ratios obtained from data collected before cloud seeding began to determine the effect of seeding. Yeah, because they had a whole lot of data and stuff available prior to 1946, right? Oh my goodness. The precipitation ratios for seeded storms were about 10 to 15% higher than the historical averages. These data indicated that precipitation increases had been realized as a result of seeding. Nevertheless, the ACWC judged that more conclusive evidence based on carefully designed randomized field trials should be sought. More testing, right? A second review of the state of the science of cloud seeding was undertaken by the Committee on Atmospheric Sciences of the National Academy of Sciences in 1966. They reported positive results of orographic seeding from randomized seeding projects in Australia and Mexico. the results of 4 long-term, privately conducted, non-randomized winter orographic cloud seeding projects in California, Utah, and Oregon were also evaluated. So again, they took the liberty. Okay, 4 long-term, privately conducted, non-randomized winter cloud seeding projects were done without public consent, without public knowledge. There are laws against that they broke. Does this not matter to anyone in charge of any of this shit? No, of course not. These operational projects were evaluated on the basis of target/control ratios of seasonal stream flow rather than precipitation. Stream flow measures, in effect, integrate watershed precipitation over the whole season. The target/control stream flow analysis indicated with a good degree of statistical confidence that increases in seasonal stream flow of 6 to 18% occurred due to seeding. However, this conclusion could be accepted only with reservations because of the necessity of relying on non-randomized data. And again, if they didn't do any of that, what was the point of doing those studies? What was the point of doing those tests and calling it science if you weren't working all sides of the equation? In 1973, a further report was prepared by a NAS panel. This panel examined several randomized seeding projects that were either underway or had been completed since the 1966 report. Special attention was given to the combined results of the Climax 1, 1960 to 1965, and Climax 2, 1965 to 1970 projects, both conducted in Colorado under the leadership of Colorado State University scientists with support from the National Science Foundation. And again, right in the middle of our country. Where is Colorado situated? It's very near the very middle of our freaking country, right? I mean, it's not exactly in the middle of our country, but it's close enough. Just took the liberty to go ahead and conduct these Climax 1, Climax 2. These benchmark projects were interpreted as giving the first definitive determination of the nature of the response of orographic clouds to seeding. The data indicated that orographic clouds having cloud top temperatures between minus 11 degrees Celsius and minus 20 degrees Celsius were very favorable for precipitation enhancement. Precipitation decreases occurred when cloud top temperatures were colder than minus 26 degrees Celsius. Precipitation decreases also occurred under very strong wind conditions. The NAS panel concluded, hence, in the longest randomized cloud seeding research project in the United States involving cold orographic winter clouds, it has been demonstrated that precipitation can be increased by substantial amounts on a determinate basis. Evaluations of the Climax project data subsequent to the NAS report have suggested effects extending beyond the time and spatial limits of seeding for the target area. In some of the experimental years, concentrations of ice nuclei in the target area in excess of the normal background persisted for days after seeding had been terminated. So, yeah. In addition, on days when seeding was conducted in the Climax project area, precipitation as far as 160 kilometers, about 100 miles, east of the mountains was found to be higher than on non-seeded days. So again, it affected it out around at least 100 miles that they are admitting to. So again, they took even more liberties of exposing people to this fake-ass snow and fake-ass rain and precipitation. Subsequent to the Weather Modification Advisory Board's report, scientists have questioned whether the Climax results may have been biased because the randomly selected seeded days were naturally more snowy than non-seeded days. This point is still being studied. And again, what is supposed to be some kind of a study and a report and research that was presented to justify what they're doing is still inconclusive and will always be inconclusive because they will never be able to account for all of the variables. No matter how hard they try, never. They never will be. The progression of evidence suggesting beneficial effects from seeding orographic clouds during the 1950s and 1960s led the Department of Interior's Bureau of Reclamation to propose large-scale application of orographic cloud seeding as a water management tool. As a step toward this goal, the Bureau of Reclamation initiated the Colorado River Basin Pilot Project over the mountains of southwest Colorado during the winter of 1970 to 1971. This 5-year experiment was patterned after the Climax project. However, post-experiment analysis revealed serious problems in the operational implementation and transferability to a different area of what were considered well-tested techniques. The randomization scheme required accurate 24-hour forecasts of the suitability of the cloud conditions for seeding, a prediction capability beyond the state of the science. Consequently, many hours of seeding occurred when conditions were unsuitable for seeding. This problem was compounded by atmospheric conditions that on certain occasions trapped seeding agents near the generators during seeded days and subsequently allowed contamination of the target area during non-seeded days. The experiment resulted in a finding of no significant difference in precipitation amount on seeded and non-seeded days. The Colorado River Basin Pilot Project did help to solidify knowledge about conditions under which orographic seeding can be employed beneficially. Reanalysis of the data by meteorological category reaffirmed the climax finding of the crucial role of cloud top temperature seedability criteria and the importance of the wind speed across the mountain barrier. It also demonstrated the need for careful design of demonstration projects, and also to get them the funding and make it, create some new jobs, because they needed to have more sensing equipment, right? To be able to read these clouds and these storm systems ahead of time in order to know which seeds, which clouds to seed, which ones were ripe for seeding, right? Bureau of Reclamation scientists recently conducted an analysis of the combined data from the Climax Project, the Colorado River Basin Pilot Project, and 5 other randomized winter cloud seeding research projects conducted in orographic settings in the western Rocky Mountains and on the U.S. Pacific Coast. Variables were developed and investigated to establish generalized seedability criteria that would be applicable to a variety of meteorological and topographic conditions. So again, variables were developed and investigated, right? So they created some variables too. So again, playing nature, attempting to play God with this stuff, right? Like they can actually imitate nature in a way that would be, suitable to test for these things for science, right? The investigators found strong positive and negative seeding effects associated with selected cloud conditions. These results need further verification with additional data, but meanwhile, they can be useful in formulating hypotheses and designing future experiments. Meanwhile, we just continue on doing these experiments based on these types of verification forms and data sets, right? A randomized project carried out in Tasmania was completed subsequent to the 1973 NAS report. Aerial seeding was conducted over a 2,600 square kilometer mountainous target area during the entire even-numbered calendar years from 1964 to 1970. No seeding was conducted during the odd-numbered years. To avoid long-term persistence effects that had been suspected in earlier Australian projects, the results indicated a 20% precipitation increase during the autumn season, with some positive effect in portions of the target area during winter and spring, and a possible decrease in summer. Statistical tests indicate a probability of less than 5% that the autumn precipitation increase arose by chance. However, some statisticians point out that multiple analyses were carried out within the single experiment, i.e., separate analysis for each of the 4 seasons, thus placing greater demands on the level of evidence required to reach such a conclusion and making it difficult to attach significance values to the results. So again, another study yet again that most likely had some impact on that region from 1964 to 1970 in just the odd-numbered years. No seeding was conducted. Anyway, this video again is getting really long too, so I'm going to leave it off right there, and I'll cover the summer cumulus clouds. I'll pick it up from there on the next reading, but I want to go through more of the major findings and just kind of read through this here, just to kind of help reiterate. They do talk about some experiments done in Florida and some that were done in Texas as well. So to me, it's just more proof. This has been ongoing, and they stated in here several times now already in this report to the Congress, to the President and Congress, that it's been ongoing since 1946. And then prior to that, I'm sure that they were doing experiments with this kind of stuff. I mean, we already know that the Native Americans did it with their powwows and stuff. And I'm not saying anything about Native Americans. Trust me, I'm not. My grandmother was full Native American. I'm quarter. So I'm not saying anything bad about the Native Americans that used to utilize this, because it was served the purpose that it was intended to serve for the, at the time. But now, they turned it into a weapon, just like everything else. They turn everything into a weapon. Everything good and useful for humanity, they have managed to pervert it and turn it into a weapon. And when they started weaponizing it, I started having a problem with it. I don't have a problem with, you know, the use of it as what it was intended for when the science of it was discovered. But to weaponize it, no thanks. Nope. And what they're doing now with it and doing these wide experiments, attempting to control those variables, and like I've said before, because I'm repetitive, I'm going to say it again, we live at ground zero for this very reason here. Because they continue to conduct these experiments, knowing full well, these people know full well that they will never gain control of that variable. They know it. But they continue to pump money into it, they continue to put time into it, and they continue to put effort into this in the attempts to play gods. And right now, Zeus is out there playing around, folks, because there's a lot of extra energy flowing around in that upper atmosphere. And they are attempting to play around with things because right now they have all of these guardsmen and all these service people all fulfilling their little couple weeks or so of service. So they're going to utilize those folks. So there's going to be some things popping off. So anyway, there's definitely more to come from this National Weather Modification Policies and Programs Report to the President and Congress of 1979. I'm not done reading it. I'm definitely going to go into more because there's some more interesting chapters here to go into. And there's definitely more to come when it comes to the the U.S. withdrawal from the WHO, too, because I want to read a couple of those other articles because sometimes it's just comical to read. Some of the comments that are made and go through and count the number of times that the name Trump is mentioned in some of those publications. It's kind of funny. So anyway, thank you for watching. Please stay safe and mindful. Know that I appreciate it and that you matter very much to me.
It calls for us taking the steps now that will make us no longer second in space and size. It lays the predicate and the foundation for a space communication satellite that will permit the people of the world to see one television program at the same time throughout the world. Think about that kind of communication, and think about the opportunity that will provide. It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine